Hey guys, welcome to this week's Roundup. I have a bunch of the usual news, plus an interview with Rob from RetroGamingCables.uk. So a bunch of good stuff, and let's jump right into it. First up, I just wanted to ensure everybody that ROMhacking.net is up and it's fine. I guess about a week ago, maybe a little less, the whole site went down due to a server error, but no one knew that. And then immediately somebody created a fake Twitter account with a similar name to ROMhacking.net and posed as if it was them and told everybody that Nintendo issued a takedown order. So I still to this day don't understand the purpose of trolling. I do understand getting people, somebody's pissing you off, so you want to get them riled up. I do that all the time in person, not on forums, but this kind of trolling I just don't understand at all. I don't get the point of why saying a great site is down, but it barely lasted a few days before everybody started figuring it out. And I think people tried to bait me into it too, because I had a few concerned readers email me and ask if I knew what was going on. But I also had a few emails that were repeated from the same email account, a few different ones like that. And I think it was them trying to get me to report that ROMhacking.net was down. So I didn't fall for it this time, trolls. But yeah, I mean, everything, according to the owner of ROMhacking.net, Nightcrawler, it was just a server error, and he's getting it back up and running soon enough. It should be 100% by the time this comes out, but if not, it's, I'm sure he's putting the last pieces together. But this is an unfortunate reminder that we need backups of all of this stuff across the internet. So I think my favorite, personally, which I talk about all the time, is the Smoke Monster ROM packs. And I like them not just because how thorough they are, but also because I know a ton of people that use them. So if something were to happen, if a server were to go down, if Smoke Monster were to lose a backup drive, there's tons of his packs unmodified floating around on the internet. I know when I download them, I download the zip and then extract it, but keep the zip. So I have like a perfect copy of it just in case. So if you guys have ROMs that are not in the Smoke Monster pack, please contact him, contact me, just so if this ever does actually happen for real, we have, legit copies of the work that people have done. And, although I can't really provide a way to, yet at least, to have like a text backup, which is, pretty much what ROMhacking.net is. It's the IPS patches and a description of what it is. At least, if nothing else, the ROMs will live out forever as long as we keep them. So take a look at the Smoke Monster pack the next time you download one, and if you happen to have any ROMs that aren't in it, ROM hacks, I guess, or I guess any ROM that's not in it, just let one of us know. And I hope I'm not overwhelming Michael by telling a bunch of people to email everything to him, but I think he's even more concerned about this stuff than I am. So one way or another, let's get all these things backed up for good, just in case something bad were to ever happen. And once again, screw you to the trolls. Last week, we had the Retro Roundtable podcast where we debated a bunch of different stuff, and it was a lot of fun. We got a lot nerdier than I would on this podcast, but I really enjoyed it. And if you guys want to see where that whole topic of, what out of stock, low volume hobby projects ended up, that was great. Those guys abused the shit out of me for like a half hour, but it was perfect. We really got to hash it out, and I don't feel like any of us held back. I wouldn't say I held back, but I certainly could have been a lot worse than I was. But I think it was great that we got to do it in a forum like that. And we touched upon open source and other stuff. So hopefully the fact that we were arguing with each other about each other's stuff was positive in that no one's going to think that we were harping on them this time. But who knows? I'm sure I always tend to piss somebody off whenever I speak, so oops. But I thought we covered a lot of great ground, and anybody that was curious about, the whole out-of-stock items thing, maybe give that a watch, because it really adds a lot of cool perspective to stuff. So, and we're going to try to continue to do that once a month, have, set topics, plus a couple other random things, and hopefully have more guests on there soon to really nerd it out with us. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and please subscribe to that on YouTube and stuff if you did. That way, the more subscribers and the more views, the more we know that people are actually digging it, so we could maybe get some more cool people on and have another one of those epic battles like last week. Next, some good news about that Game Boy Color backlight fiasco. I got all of my money back. So I'm kind of shocked, to be honest with you. I guess I don't know what happened with the seller. I don't know if the product was ever real or if it was just some way to get money from people. But the seller never shipped that Game Boy Color to Biner, Bhiner, who was kind of like the middleman. And because it's a 12-hour time difference, it took a bit of time, but I got a full refund from Biner, including like the fees they charged and everything. So it just took a few days of, acknowledging that I wanted to cancel the order, having the cancellation go through, waiting for the refund, but they were super friendly and I got every penny back. So while that project itself might be a big fail, this is at least... We all know that the company Biner, so once again, BHINER.com, seems to be a decent middleman. They didn't pay me to say that or anything. I just I figured I would share that with you guys because it's nice to know that I didn't lose $104 or $150 for no reason. So I guess I'll use them next time I need something from Taobao, and hopefully next time it won't be fake. Next, Super G is about to list the Gcompsw switch for sale on his website. That's that automatic switching 4-port component video switch he's been working on. It actually will probably be live about the same time as this podcast, so if you're listening, definitely check his website. I did a full review of it a little while back of a prototype unit that worked perfect, so I'll leave that link in the description as well as a link to his website. And he also wanted to let everybody know that the SCART switches, that the last batch of those, are all shipped. So you should either have already gotten it or you will be getting it very soon. And the extras will all be sold next week. Next, there's actually 2 updates to the NT Mini firmware. Last Friday, as promised, Gcompsw released one that added the Arcadia 2001 core, the Channel F core, and the Creative Vision core. I actually don't know what any of those are, but I'm glad that they're preserved in FPGA. And after just a few days later, he released another firmware that was just a bug fix update and kind of tweaked a few things. And also, Gcompsw posted a video of his cartridge adapters and what they're going to look like and kind of how he makes them, which I thought was really interesting as well. So once again, more progress with this thing, and I can't wait to see what he comes up with next. Next, there's a fun video floating around the internet about a guy who automated his house with the Zelda Ocarina. So while this isn't directly retro gaming news, it's pretty awesome, and I think anybody with even the slightest bit of nerdiness in him is going to love it. So basically, he has a microphone and a Raspberry Pi that's constantly listening, and he programmed it so that when he hears some of the Ocarina tunes, it fires off commands to different things. I don't want to spoil it. Just trust me, if you have even the slightest bit of nerdiness and you like to build stuff, this video will make you smile. It's totally impractical, but it's awesome. Next, Primal Rage II is now playable via a custom version of MAME. So I believe this was an unreleased arcade game that was mostly finished but never hit the market. And then people found boards of it a few years ago and actually had it playing in an arcade in Illinois, I believe. And then just recently the ROM was floating around but wasn't playable on any version of MAME. So somebody created a version specifically for it, and actually I believe he even has the source code up for anybody that wants to contribute. So that's pretty awesome. Once again, another game is not lost to history. We've kind of resurrected it and kept it alive forever now, as long as nobody loses the ROM. So yeah, good work to the team involved in that. Next, Rob from Retro Gaming Cables posted an article about which SCART to HDMI converters to avoid and why he thinks you should avoid them. I, for the most part, agree totally, and I kind of hate these things. I've had a lot of people argue that they're so cheap, it's a good start for people that maybe just have a quick blast of nostalgia and they'll never use the game again, or maybe they can't afford something right now, but they're getting ready to get an OSSC or a FrameMeister. And while I guess those are good enough excuses, especially because I think these are about $30 in the US, there are so many issues with them. So my 2 biggest complaints by far was that this particular one handles 240p and processes it as 480i, so you get a shaky interlaced image. And the few of these that I've tried add about 5 frames of lag, which is just insane. Rob pointed out that some of these will only work with composite video, CVBS, And I've seen ones that only work with TTL sync, which is the opposite. Most people want 75 ohm C sync, or most devices, I mean. So it's a good read, and I agree with him 100% on that. The one kind of interesting thing I found for this, I used to say this was good enough if you just wanted to stream, like if you weren't streaming for the purpose of quality, right? You just wanted to play a game and have your friends watch, or you were just archiving something like, oh, check out the speed run. This is a pretty good solution just because of how cheap it is. But the one other thing I found for it is that the OSSC in line triple mode is not compatible with my TV or my capture card with Super Nintendo. So by running it through this, the HDMI input, and then to the output of this going into my capture card, it actually worked. And although it's not great quality, it's way better than just directly into this in the capture card. So, hey, if you already own one of these, at least you could add that to the list of things it might be useful for. But it's, I know a bunch of people disagree with me, but I'm still sticking with my guns on the fact that, I would not use these to game ever. Capture cards, sure, but never to play a game because it's just 5 frames of lag plus whatever's on your TV. It's unbearable. I don't think I could play any game in that. So, just our thoughts on it, I guess. Thanks to Smoke Monster for this next tip. I guess an unreleased Dreamcast racing game was found on a dev kit. So somebody had purchased a Dreamcast development kit, and on the hard drive was the game Millennium Racer, Y2K Fighters. So I guess this was a racing game that was available on PC, and they were working on a Dreamcast port. And it's mostly playable and now available to download. So it's pretty cool. It's twice in today's episode that we have a game saved from getting lost in history. So I don't know how these things keep popping up all these years later, but I'm really glad they do. A bit of fun news now. Remember those Genesis USB hubs? So they basically look like a mini Sega Genesis, but they're a USB hub. And people were really hacking them to get a Raspberry Pi in it and turning them to a mini gaming station. Well, Alex, aka ArcadeTV, has designed a board that you could install in it that actually has 15 kilohertz RGB output with a Raspberry Pi. So that way you'd be able to just kind of drop it in and add, as well as a Raspberry Pi into one of these things. So what a neat and fun way of going about doing this, and I can't wait to get one to try for myself just for the hell of it. Now I'll have to find another reason to use a second Raspberry Pi. So yeah, I'm excited. I love fun little projects like this. So awesome work as always, Alex. Next, there's a new demo out of the fan-made Alex Kidd 2. So it's an unofficial fan-made sequel, and this is the third demo of it, and it looks really, really cool. It looks like, it looks like the original, but slightly improved a bit. So I'll keep everybody updated on the progress, and hopefully we'll see a full release soon. Next, TMEE has posted the Sega Light Phaser schematic on the SMS Power forums. And while this probably won't affect most of us, I love when stuff like this is available, because now it's yet another thing documented that we have. I'm not sure how or why this could be used for anything. I'm just sure that at some point it's going to be very useful. So big thanks to him for doing that for us. And lastly, I just posted a video that's kind of an overview of the Tianli Sega VCD Player. So it's a video CD player released only in China that plays Genesis games. I don't think the video came out that great. It was like the last video I did at my old apartment. I was rushing to get it done before I moved, and the video didn't come out the way I wanted. It originally was supposed to be that Justin, aka the Goodwill Hunter, who found it, was going to do a part 1 and kind of do an overview, and I was going to do an in-depth part 2 and kind of show all the chips inside of it and trace it out and maybe even mod it for RGB if it wasn't. But I ran out of time. So, I'm sorry if it was kind of just a clone of what Justin did, and I hope I at least got a little more information out there about it. And I think I edited it good enough so it doesn't suck, but I've been trying really hard to get my videos at least a little bit higher quality. I mean, I will never be on the level of Phone Dork or My Life in Gaming or anything, but, I think they're good enough for what they are, and I didn't feel like that last one was. I felt like I missed a lot of stuff and a lot of testing I could have done. So I did want to post it because it's kind of a cool thing to see, especially if you never even knew things like that existed before. But I promise the next ones that I do will be way better than that. So thanks for your patience. Before I get to the Q&A, is just a very quick update on the stuff I have for sale. I was able to get a few things in the hands of people that needed it, so that was cool. But I still have the iScan Micro and 2 guitars I really got to sell. So if you know anybody that wants a pretty cool heavy metal guitar, please pass them the link, because I got to get rid of those kind of soon. So thanks, guys. Now on to the Q&As. There was a lot of opposing opinions in the comments last week about the GDMU and how to handle hobby projects. And since we got into that pretty heavy in the Retro Roundtable, I'm not going to go through that again. But if you're interested in the opinions, definitely check out that podcast, which I have a link to in the description, of course. But more importantly, people were posting a lot of other alternatives. And I don't really have experience with any of these, so I'm not sure where they rank, if one's better than the other. My buddy Chris showed me an alternative that you run an IDE board out the back, so you have to cut your Dreamcast, but you could kind of have an IDE hard drive loading it, which looked neat. I think that one was out of stock too. And then a lot of people had posted about the USB GD-ROM, which is another alternative. And somebody even made a 3D printed tray for that. So I guess you remove the CD-ROM drive, you put the 3D printed tray in, and then that way it kind of has a nice flush solution for you. So it was cool. I'm glad there's other alternatives out there. And I'll keep everybody posted when the GDMU is back up for sale, and if there's any other alternatives coming out in the future. A few people posted in the comments in regards to the right to repair issue that's going on now. First, Michael Quattrochi posted a link to the iFixit page, which kind of has it summarized pretty nicely. And he also made a point that I own and demonstrate many useful and modified pieces of hardware that would be prohibited if the vendors had a say in it. I never thought of it that way. That's pretty cool. I, of course, as you would imagine, would be on the consumer side of this and the stores. Basically, I'm against the manufacturer saying you can't repair your own products. And it does, it kind of forces you to buy new products all the time, and it sucks. It's not good practice for anybody. One other person posted something kind of interesting, Volkler Eisenfeld. He said, I'm incorrect about one aspect. According to a specific law, which he linked in case anybody was interested, a manufacturer cannot tie the validity of warranty to exclusive use of authorized repair, including the consumer. Meaning that those warranty void stickers are lying, and the companies cannot legally deny a warranty claim unless they can prove that any repair or modification of the consumer made was the direct cause of the warranty claim. But most people ignore this law, and I've been on every side of this. I've been on, I've worked for a company that manufactured products, and if it came back and the warranty sticker was gone, but the problem was a bad motherboard, we wouldn't say a word. We would just fix the motherboard and send it back. But if it comes back and there's a rainbow-colored SATA cable in there, which we never shipped with, it's like, all right, somebody's been messing with something. We would. I don't think that we've ever actually come straight out and said we're denying a warranty, but we've certainly, unless it was cases like it was smashed into a million pieces, but we'd be skeptical of stuff like that. So, and on the other side, I have had things that were turned away because I had opened it up myself. I had people straight up say, if you opened it, that completely voids everything. An open product is a broken product, and we're not fixing it for you. Which sucked, because I didn't do anything wrong. All I did was pop the bottom off of a laptop once just to see, what was broken on it, and I got denied a return, which, yeah. So, I really hope people take notice of this stuff, and if there's a petition to sign or a place that we can go for it, definitely do it, because, manufacturers shouldn't have such tight control over things. Just exactly like the right to jailbreak that was fought in the U.S., and I think it's still an ongoing thing. If you own a product and if you own the hardware, do you own the software on it? Or is that controlled somewhere else? So, all good arguments. And I'm always rooting for the people, not the manufacturers. So, you guys know where I stand on this one. But thanks again for the links. Next, a few people actually posted in regards to the game Secret Command that I talked about last week, which had a speed patch. So first, B-Trim said that Ashura, Rambo, and Secret Commando are pretty much the same game. I hadn't really played through any of them, so I didn't realize that. But also, Bumtree said that all of the European box arts, cartridges, and listings at the time for the localized Mark III game Ashura are actually say Secret Command. So the box and the cover art does, and then the title screen says Secret Commando. But the incorrect former name is what everyone used in common parlance. And then he said, we were mostly aware of the discrepancy, but didn't care. I don't know if you meant we, like you're part of the SMS Power team, or we just a consumer, but if you are, great work on SMS Power. Love that site. So thanks for the clarification, and I don't know why, but I'm always so amused by stories like this. You know, one of my favorites is the band Killswitch Engage. The song My Last Serenade was listed incorrectly as My Life's Serenade, and I always thought that was hilarious, that you could print thousands of copies of the wrong thing, and it slips out even in this day and age. So the fact that they did it, you know, in the 80s is, you know, it's still happening today. It's not just a thing from back then, but cool. Thanks for the explanations. Next, the Analog Man asked, is there a dump of the NES palette from the GameCube Zelda Collector's Edition title? I've done a search but can't find anything specific. So it's funny because I joked last week about how Firebrand X said he was done with the project but might get back into it eventually. There's a bunch of different like collector's edition remakes of the old versions on GameCube, you know, and all the Game Boy Color titles and things like that, which I don't know how their color palettes compare to the rest of them. But and I personally, I'm still just happy with the ones that you know, that we have now. But yeah, it's kind of funny because I guess if FBX were to come out of retiring for that, it would probably be for something like cloning those. But I don't know if any actually exist. And I've only played that game for a short period of time, and I vaguely remember not liking the color palette. So I don't know specifically why, and maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe the monitor I was using at the time just didn't like it. But if anybody has any thoughts on that, please let me know. Okay, up next I have an interview with Rob from RetroGamingCables.uk. And for people watching on YouTube, definitely check out the video that's playing now. It shows the injection mold process of how he makes his newer cables. And I wanted to specifically put it in this video rather than just stick it in with the interview, because I don't know about you guys, but for a lot of these interviews that I listen to other people's podcasts, I kind of have it on in the background, and I'm not always paying attention to the video part. And I just thought this was so cool, I wanted to actually show it and make sure that people watching on YouTube really got a chance to see what it's all about. But basically, what the injection molding is, he's doing the video with one hand because he's holding the camera with the other, which is actually kind of funny to watch. But he has the metal mold made, and he lays the cables out through them in their place and puts them in the machine, which then fills it with plastic. And he talks about this in detail in the interview, but I mean, it's great both for strain relief and for options of what else you can do. He specifically has these molds now for Genesis 1 and 2, PlayStation, and the Nintendo consoles. And another reason for this is that he could have the fully shielded versions of his cables offered with all of this. He calls those the Pack-a-Punch versions. But basically that's where each of the individual cables inside the main cable is also shielded, which is a pretty big deal for analog video. And, you know, overall, I really enjoyed how the interview went and how he answered a lot of this stuff. Because I was kind of gearing up for maybe a debate on something or maybe disagreeing, but it really sounds like he's absolutely on the ball with this and knows what he needs to do to improve, knows what he's already been doing right for a long time, and everything in between, which is really great to hear for any company making any product. So I had a great time talking to him, and it was St. Patrick's Day when we recorded it, his Friday night. So we decided to have a couple beers while doing it and just make it more like two nerds talking at a bar rather than an interview, which I enjoyed. Hopefully you guys did too. So, you know, as always, thanks for watching. Any comments or criticism, please leave it down below. I always like to hear what you guys have to say. And I'll see you guys next week. Hey guys, I'm here with Rob from Retro Gaming Cables. How you doing, man?
Yeah, not too bad.
So as we discussed, we're going to start this out right. I'm going to do myself a shot of Jack. I know it's you said you're doing Irish whiskey, but I'm out. So Jack's all I got.
Since it's St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I'll do a multi-language salute. We say cheers in America. It's Prost in Sweden. Yakida is Welsh. What else am I forgetting? Skål? No, Prost is German. Skål is Swedish. What's Canada? Shots, eh? Yeah, we'll do that. Shots, eh? I actually knew how to say it in Mandarin Chinese as well, but my pronunciation is so bad, it's best that I don't even try. All right, now I'm switching back to beer because too many shots. I won't make it through this. So I'm glad we finally get to talk. I've been working with you for years with your cables and stuff, and always bugging you to make different shit for me and trying to get things worked out. How'd you get started in all this? You know, were you a retro gamer? Were you just do you make other cables for a living? Like, how'd you get started?
It's hard to say, really. I suppose I started it was about 10 years ago now. At the time, I was a service engineer in the electronics bingo industry, and used to drive all over the country and fix bingo machines for bingo halls all over the UK, Scotland, Ireland, stuff like that. And I just got a bit fed up of all the traveling around. So then one day I just thought, right, I'm just going to do something different. So I handed in my resignation and went to university to study electronics for 4 years. So that was back in, I can't think now, 2008, something like that. So yes, started at university. You call it college in America?
Yeah.
Yeah, college.
They call it college, but a lot of the colleges are like the university of, which is weird.
Yeah.
So
it's like you call like college school. I don't really know how it works there. It's kind of
in American English, there's like 7 or 8 words to describe the same thing, and then of course in just the English language, there's the same word to describe 2 different things. Like, it's lovely weather outside, or whether or not we're going to finish the podcast, or if Bob's not too drunk. Like, it's the same word spelled differently, but that's why the English is such a pain to learn for as a second language. If I didn't learn it as my first, I wouldn't be able to. I probably wouldn't be able to.
Yeah. So I started university. Then I just wanted to make a bit of money, on the side. And I don't know how I got the idea, but I just started making, cables for the Mega Drive. Mega Drive 1, the Genesis, you call it in America, don't you? And just started selling them on eBay. And slowly picking up gradually, over the months. And then it just started to become like a nice little business, on the side whilst I was studying. And then when I graduated in 2012, there wasn't much going on with regards to employment around. So I thought I'll give this a try, full time. That's basically where it took off from, really.
Yeah, it was 2012, you said? 2012. It's funny, it's pretty much about the same time I started the website, maybe right after or right before I started the website. So yeah, we both, got into this about the same time. Why gaming cables? Are you just always a retro game fan? Well, they weren't retro when we were kids, but we were always...
Yeah, I've always grown up with mainly the Segas rather than Nintendo. So I think here in the UK, the Sega was the most affordable one, I think, out of the 2. If you had a friend who had a Nintendo, their parents had money.
That was the Neo Geo in America. If you were a Neo Geo kid, you were usually an only child, spoiled rich kid. I'm sure I'm going to get hate from all the Neo Geo fans out there. I knew a bunch of kids that worked their butts off doing odd jobs to get them, but yeah, mostly it was just the mega rich kids.
Yeah. So I've always grown up with the Segas, and I think my first console was an Atari 2600, and then went up to a 7800, then Master System. So that's where it took off from the Sega.
Gotcha.
And then the Mega Drive. And then I had all kinds of things after that. As a teenager, I even went to the dark side and got an Amiga.
I still haven't actually played one of those yet. It's on my list of things to get.
Yeah, Amiga 1200. Fantastic, really. Amiga CD32.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just things like that. And then I think when I left home at the age of 19, then you start your working career, then you kind of lose track of all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I've recently just got back into it all, with doing it as a job. So, yeah, I'm starting to build my collection back up again. All the games I had back in the day.
Yeah, it's funny when I moved out, it was the same thing, and I took all of my old consoles and I went to a game store where I kind of sort of knew the owner, and I asked if I could trade all of them for 2 Xboxes. And I hacked the Xboxes and put, one in my living room, one in my bedroom, so they were my media player, and it had all the emulators on it. And I thought, well, this is perfect. Why would I ever need the original consoles? And it wasn't until I started, and I never really gamed on them that much, but when I went back and started to actually play through the games, and I don't know if it's my OCD or something, but I started to see huge differences between the emulated versions and the originals, and then, of course, the lag and stuff once you get a flat screen, and it drove me nuts. I had to go back. Had to go back and play it on a real console.
Yeah. Yeah, so so I'm back into retro gaming now, I suppose. So I'm trying to complete my rather than getting, people have just collect games for the sake of it, but I'm trying to collect the stuff I had when I was a kid. So I kind of try and buy job lots from eBay. Mm-hmm. So I've got loads of duplicates of games. I'm still trying to get those rare ones which I had. I used to collect a lot of the Japanese games as well for the Mega Drive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was really good because I really like the artwork on the boxes. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I started with that as well. I needed to have everything that I'd given away. And then it was like, all right, I got to have the consoles that I always was dying to know what they were like. And like the Saturn and the CDI. And I knew the CDI sucked. I just had to know what it was like to play it. And it was just, I think I got it fairly cheap. My friend Justin finds me all these great deals on them. And when I got it home, I was so excited to experience how shitty it actually was. It's such a weird thing to say because you don't grasp how bad it is through an emulator. And then, of course, the opposite with the Saturn. What a cool and great system. So.
Yeah, I kind of missed out on the Saturn and the Dreamcast and the GameCube. I kind of came out of gaming at that point in time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I really got back into it, I think, with the PlayStation 2 for a while. And then for the last probably 10 years, Xbox. So I play a lot of online Call of Duty. That's what I mainly play at the moment. So on the Xbox.
I think my brother had a PlayStation 2, so I got to try Grand Theft Auto and one of the others, which was fun, but I really, I was traveling for work. I was all over the place. I couldn't sit and play a game. It was really when the Wii came back out that I started to realize, because, the Wii was a fun, gimmicky toy, which has some amazing games, some games that, was a controller gimmick. But then when I started playing some of the classic games on it through the Virtual Console, that's kind of what sparked my whole... That and finding the angry video game nerd who always makes me laugh. But those two things were like the catalyst for like having to go and get the originals. And then getting a lot of the newer games. Like when I first played A Cave Story, I was blown away. I mean, I felt like this could be a Genesis game, which is funny because somebody's actually recreating it on the Genesis right now. So, but
cool.
Yeah. So, before we get into the actual cable talk and everything, there's something I want to make sure that everybody listening understands, because it's very easy for nerds to start talking, and I mean that nerd with respect, obviously, but to nerds to start talking and people just kind of skip over. Making analog cables is really fucking hard. I mean, there's, anybody, of course, could solder a connector, but trying to figure out where the interference lies, any of the grounding issues, how you need to shield things, and then going through the many different revisions of consoles. I got a bunch of questions for you. I just don't want anybody at home to think I'm like accusing or basically I'm not. All of my questions are genuine. None of them are going to be, I'm not picking on you at all. I'm asking because there's just so much out there and there's so many fascinating things to learn. And I never thought how excited I would get about cables until I really got into this stuff. So yeah, it's not easy, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not like digital where you just make sure there's make sure there's nothing pinched and there's a microfarad at the end, and you get yourself a decent HDMI. So, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, how? I guess with the Genesis, because you said that was your first one that you started making, right?
Yeah.
So were you able to find at that time just a repository to get these connectors, or were they just off the shelf 8 pins? And like, how did you
Um,
start those original first cables that you sold on eBay?
yeah. The, I did manage to source the correct pin configuration because a lot of people see a regular 8-pin DIN, which is a 260-degree configuration. It's like a C shape.
Mm-hmm.
But the Genesis uses a U shape, which is a 272-degree configuration. So the top 2 pins are slightly misaligned, but that, that can stop it from pushing in. If you try and use a regular 8-pin on a Mega Drive Genesis. So yeah, I was able to source the correct connectors for those from a company just down the road from where I live. So it wasn't too bad.
That's lucky.
But mega expensive. Really expensive.
And what did you do for the cable itself? Did you do the old trick in using RJ45 cable, or did you get slightly better for your first run?
I think initially I was using something called a Defense Standard 8-core 7-strand 0.2 diameter cable, which it's used in the defense industry.
That's actually quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I mean, the gauge on that is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So it can carry a lot of current, which compared to the stuff you get from China, if you used to get a cheap Chinese cable and take it apart, and it'll have a few strands of copper wire, and it's not really adequate. So
I don't know if you've seen, but there were cables out there that literally used twisted pair RJ45 cable.
Yeah.
And it was kind of scary to see.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That might be good for interference, actually, because you got twisted pairs. I don't know. Experiment.
Yeah, I think because in twisted pair cable there's not enough pairs to have each. So I think some lines were actually tied to each other, like in the twist. So that's it's actually the opposite. Right. It was a lot worse for interference, but.
Oh yeah, 'cause it's an 8-core, isn't it? So you'd have to have,
4 pairs, right?
Yeah.
So the lines were twisted, but so when I first started getting into this, it was so confusing to figure out what sync is, what's C-sync, why does it matter, and it took and I had a lot of people that were patient enough to sit there and really explain what it meant, but it was still over my head. It really, when I forgot who it was or maybe it was a combination of people to break it down, that the SCART standard uses composite video as the sync, just standard old composite video. You can plug it right into a TV and get a picture out of it. And that the only problem with using that is that when you have the composite video line running so close to the color lines, most importantly the blue color line, the interference kind of bounces between the cables, causing that. And that, I guess, technically speaking, if you were to drill 4 holes in the back of a console and use, shielded cable, the big-ass BNC cable all the way up, you could actually use composite video and there wouldn't be any interference at all. So it's really just chasing C-Sync is just a way to eliminate as much interference as possible. But the problem with that is that there's a handful of consoles that don't output it, and then you have ones like Saturn, and PlayStation 1 and 2, depending on which models, but that have different motherboard revisions that have different components on them, right? So that was I can't remember off the top of my head. Was it later revision Model 2s didn't have the components on the motherboard and they needed to be in the cable? Was that the case?
Was that for the Saturn or the
Saturn?
PlayStation?
Yes.
The Saturn. I think it was some revisions. Yeah, so you have to add an extra capacitor and 75 ohm resistor,
which is on the board of the other Saturn models.
Yeah.
That's kind of what a frustrating thing to go by, And then a lot of people say just use Luma, but the problem with that is a lot of displays, processors, and other things won't accept anything other than a clean 75 ohm C-Sync. And then you could say, well, why don't, if it's only a matter of compatibility, why don't you just throw a sync stripper in the head, which in many cases is the perfect solution. But then it's, well, what if you end up then eventually buying a G-SCART switch, so you're running a stripper through a stripper, and, I've actually seen issues with that before. So I'm not sure why or what, but it's not common, but it's a couple of people said they had sync strikes, I think, and had to remove the sync stripper out of their cable, and it's just what a nightmare.
Yeah, the sync stripper does add a little bit of amplitude to the signal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at one volt peak to peak for an ideal, well, that's maximum.
Mm-hmm.
If you run it through, if you're already running that through that kind of amplitude through a sync stripper, then it's going to introduce amplification slightly. And if you go for another sync stripper, it's just going to get bigger and bigger, and then it's going to cause problems at the end.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, over the years, I've seen you constantly improve and add new revisions of your cables. And what started out as a good cable is, in some ways, become pretty freaking impressive. Some of the stuff that you've been able to add and jam in there, and it's really good to see people constantly improving their work. Forum trolls aside, there's been a lot of good and bad feedback of every cable out there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the bad feedback has actually, at least for me, been a great learning experience, because if somebody says, hey, I bought the Saturn cable and it doesn't work, what the hell? They're actually 100% right. And then that's how you learn the things about certain model revisions don't have the components on the board. And that's how...
Yeah.
And it's frustrating for any seller, and for the consumers too, of course. But it's kind of a... It's been such a mind-blowing thing to see how many different revisions, and to see how, generally speaking, Nintendo consoles were pretty straightforward. You buy a Super Nintendo, you're going to get TTL sync out of it, out of the C-Sync pin on all North American revisions done. But for Sega, geez, roll the dice.
Yeah. Well, what I've always thought of, well, my ethos has always been, I'm running a business. Any kind of profit I make, I put it back into equipment and improving, the way I do things to obviously make the product better, make more sales, and that's the way I've always done it. I've invested a lot recently in an injection mold machine to overmold the connectors. So, say for instance, this is a PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
Connector which I overmold.
And then you have the composite video right on that?
Yeah, that's for
the light guns.
For the light gun, so it says light gun on there as well.
That is freaking awesome. I love it.
And then there's the Nintendo as well. So that's a different tool for the Nintendo.
So are you actually making these cables yourself, or do you
Yeah.
Huh, so you source, obviously you're not making the cable itself, you source
No.
large reams of that, and then you actually make each of the ends, the SCART end, and then the console end, and then...
Yeah.
That's, I guess that's good, but man, that must be time consuming.
Yeah. Well, the cable we use is actually made in the UK.
Oh.
In one of only a couple of factories left which actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we buy the cable in the UK, and we get our web address printed on there, made in Britain, well, onto the cable. And yeah, there's some parts we have to get from China, like SCART plugs.
Yeah.
The actual connectors themselves. But yeah, we soldered them on, and yeah.
So for a while you were offering a shielded option for a couple of your cables. So is that each cable individually inside of it was shielded, or is it just the outside of the cable that was shielded?
Yeah, we did a range called the Pack-a-Punch.
Mm-hmm.
Big zombie fan. Big zombie Call of Duty fan. Pack-a-Punch. We did that for the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive 1. So basically, it was 75 ohm mini coaxial cable.
Mm-hmm.
So each strand, each color was insulated. The sound was insulated, and then it was overall insulated as well with not foil.
So don't skip over that one because that's very important. So what you're saying is that the red, green, and blue lines, as well as the left and right audio lines, all had their own shielding around the actual data lines coming down it.
Yeah, everything is individually shielded and overall shielded using braid.
That is vitally important, and I've seen people sell shielded cables. I usually use eBay as an example just because there's so much garbage on eBay. I'm not shitting on all of eBay. There's a lot of good stuff, but there was one that was basically, it might as well have been a shielded network cable. It wasn't that bad, but it was, the strands inside were thin, and you could probably break them if you just wiggled them once or twice. And then just the outside of it was shielded, which doesn't hurt, but at the same time, that's not going to do anything for signal coupling or anything like that. So that's pretty cool. Are you guys? Do you plan on continuing those to make those and offer them?
Yeah. One of the reasons I bought this injection mold machine was to be able to make pack-a-punch cables for every console. The problem we had at the time was you could buy. Take the Genesis 2, for example. Mm-hmm. The Genesis 2 connector, which is a 9-pin mini DIN. Mm-hmm. The cable entry on the strain relief is about 6 millimeters in diameter. Mm-hmm. So you physically cannot get, like an 8 or a 9 millimeter cable in there. Mm-hmm. So the idea was to buy a molding machine and then have injection molding tools made for each connector, and then I could use any diameter I want on each console. Here's one of my tools. This is a tool for the Nintendo. Comes in 2 halves. And
I love seeing stuff like this. It brings me back to the company I used to work for, where we manufactured everything. So those. That's what, $60,000 in your hand right there. So.
No, not that much, but pretty expensive because these are they're not just milled out with a machine. It's a process called Sparky Road. Mm-hmm. But I have to make. Don't know if you heard of that. I have to make the initial die from copper, and it's slowly pushed into the metal over time in water. You can Google, videos on YouTube of Sparky Roaded tools. It's a fascinating process.
All of our stuff was very large, so we didn't need to need to worry about that. But wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
is that's an injection mold tool, not an SLA plastic tool, obviously, right?
Yeah. So you load your cables in. You load a cable. This is a 2-shot process, so it overmolds it twice. Mm-hmm. So you initially put the cable in this side. Mm-hmm. And it does the first shot of plastic, and then you move it over to this side for the final shot. Mm-hmm. So it's a 2-shot process. That's where the gun goes in there. It comes down on a pneumatic ram and injects it in for about 30 seconds.
So basically, once these molds are done, you can't open up the console side after you've gotten it, right?
No, that's it.
There's people online that debate this, and I might be in the minority side of this, but I don't think you should open the console side. I think when you see cable that big going into something so small, some sellers put 2-part epoxy in there to hold it in. I mean, I don't really have a problem with that either, to be honest with you. I mean, it's when you have something, it would be different if you had one pair cable going in, but there's just. The amount of I guess so. Are you using the overmold as strain release as well? Strain relief.
So it's got the strain relief built in. So this from here to here, it's all injected, and it's one, really really rigid.
Gotcha.
But going back to the Pack-a-Punch, the idea with the Pack-a-Punch was to be able to take out these inserts here, so you can put a wider diameter cable in, and that's what we're going to be doing in the future. So
Oh, that's cool.
we'll be able to pack a punch the Nintendos, the PlayStations, and I've just ordered molds for the Genesis 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing about the Genesis 2 connector is the outer diameter of the connector will allow it to fit into a Genesis 3 console. We'll be able to fit through the case.
I was just going to ask about that. I'm not sure if you'd heard any of the discussions we've had about that, but I was dead wrong. For years, I thought those consoles were not able to output RGB without a mod, and that was because you just couldn't get the cable in all the way. So
yeah, I saw that video.
I wanted so badly to be right because I did actually have one console that wouldn't, which was just a bad connector. It had nothing to do with the console and the manufacturing. So, but very cool. So, when will those be available again?
I should have had the new tools, the new molding tools for the Segas last week, but you know.
What about that's the Super Nintendo one right there, right?
Yeah, I've already got the Super Nintendo and the.
So the Super Nintendo Pack-a-Punch are back on your website?
Oh no, not yet. No, because the reason for the delay in Pack-a-Punching these is the manufacturer made these inserts come out for the cable grip, but the actual strain relief, they made it too small.
Oh, okay.
So these are going to be sent back, and they're going to widen the strain reliefs here to allow me to put up to an 11mm diameter cable.
Jeez.
So, yeah.
I'm going to start saving my money because I'm going to order one of each of those then.
Yeah. But yeah, the Genesis 2 molds will also do the Saturn as well. Because it's the even though it's a 10-pin mini DIN, it's the same diameter.
Same size and shape of the basics.
Same size connector, yeah.
Yeah.
Just the extra pin. So.
Sorry, I live next to a hospital. I don't know if you could hear it through there.
Yeah,
but there's like 5 cop cars, an ambulance, and something driving by. Probably an angry cab at the same time. It's a little annoying. Welcome to New York City, guys. So, but, is that done? Let me try to close that. But now I lost my damn train of thought. So have you actually done testing to see the difference both on an oscilloscope and through a capture card on some of the shielded and unshielded in different scenarios?
Yeah, I did it with the Mega Drive stroke Genesis 2 because it was driving me nuts for forever. Because it tends to buzz a lot more than the
audio buzz, right?
The model, yeah. The audio buzz is more prominent than the Model 1. I tried all sorts of things. I tried individually shielded cables for all the colors and the sound. I even disconnected the sound, and you still get the buzzing through the TV, even when the sound's disconnected.
Really?
Yeah. You know when you crank it up to full volume, you still get. I was recently. This was a while ago. This was probably about a year ago, something like that. And then about a couple of weeks ago, I jumped back on it again because I thought I want to solve this problem because I tried all sorts of different things, and I got out my scope and I've got a copy of 240p test suite on my EverDrive. What I was doing, I was measuring the current output on each color. So put a red on the screen, what's the current drawn, green on the screen, blue on the screen, white, and then churn it all down. And obviously you get it pulls more current when it's putting white on the screen.
Right.
And because I thought it was an issue with the resistors, I thought the calculations for the resistors were wrong. Anyway, it turned out to be my male-to-male SCART from my switch to my TV was crap.
Really?
All those years. Yeah, so I pulled out a really expensive Pack-a-Punch SCART cable I do,
Hmm.
which is
Wait, so
individually
you weren't
sealed.
using your own cable to test?
No, I was using some cheap shit.
There you go. Lesson learned right there.
Yeah. So after I put this new cable in, it dramatically reduced the buzzing um, to an acceptable level, to be quite honest. So yeah,
So
lesson
that's
learned.
on the shielded version, not the standards, right?
Yeah, the shielded version of the male-to-male SCART from my SCART switch to my TV. I've got a Delta Blue SCART switch,
Hmm.
which is pretty decent, I suppose.
So
Uh,
people ask me all the time, like, "Hey, I see you got both cables linked on your site. What do you recommend?" And it's a hard question because I have a bit of OCD. I wouldn't have a website about how to make every little bit of your console better if I didn't. But some things affect me way worse than others, like jail bars. On a flat screen TV, like I can't even play the game. It just drives me nuts. But on
yeah.
a CRT, I could barely notice some certain audio things. I think audio buzz from game consoles. I think that's ingrained in the back of my brain because I mean, my band hated me in the mixing process of our album because I heard every frequency that was off. The guy who was mixing the album couldn't hear any of it, so he just thought I was making shit up. But I actually have a very wide range of hearing, and that audio buzz never bothers me because I think why is because that's just always how it was as a kid. You play Sonic, it goes to the white title screen, you hear the hum. That's, to me, maybe my brain's telling me this is what Sonic sounds like. That's
Yeah.
it never. So I always say, if it's your favorite console, just buy the shielded one just because. I mean, at the end of the day, what's it really going to matter? If it's not your favorite console, then what does that matter either anyway? It's not like you're going to buy a bad cable. But what is, I guess, what is your? I mean, you're running a business, so of course you want everybody to buy the more expensive one. That's life. But what, as a nerd and a gamer, what is your advice for people who ask you, what would you, do you buy the regular or the shielded?
Um, I don't know. It's preference really. When I did sell the Pack-a-Punch, I was selling them for like £45, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because the cost of the materials was quite high to make, and it was time consuming as well.
Mm-hmm,
And the idea with the new injection mold
mm-hmm.
is that it's going to make it a lot cheaper, so I can bring that price right down.
Mm-hmm.
So my long-term plan is to shield everything and eventually phase out the cable I'm using at the moment, which is shielded, but not individually shielded.
Right.
So
I was
probably,
actually just going to ask if you were going to do that because
yeah,
that's great to hear. That's great.
yeah. Because at the moment when I used to make the Pack-a-Punch, it's just so time consuming. You can imagine stripping the shielding off each individual wire and twizzling it all together, and
Oh, I don't have to imagine. I've done it, and man, it
yeah,
sucks. It's
yeah.
yeah, that's
And then
not easy.
heat shrink and everything as well, which
Yeah.
is really time consuming. And then with the Pack-a-Punch, we use a metal SCART housing, a
Hmm.
gold plated one. So you've got to make sure it's properly insulated so you don't get any short circuits, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So but another advantage with our new PCB design is it does away with all the heat shrinking.
Yeah.
It makes it nice and neat. So when we come to do the Pack-a-Punch again, we don't need to worry about, heat shrinking wires and components. Before we used to have to heat shrink like capacitors, stuff like that. We won't need to do that now. We can solder straight to the board and not have to worry about anything shorting out on the metal casing
Hmm.
of the plug. So
Because it's not going to go anywhere because it's a rigid
yeah,
circuit board. So
yeah,
I've had a
very
question when I
rigid.
first saw those, right? So I've obviously I take apart everything, so I've seen your original cables and how you have everything to each SCART pin. And the way when they were shielded, the way they were all set up, there's it's awesome. But then each individual cable could wiggle the connector, and sometimes there's a lot of disadvantages when you put signals on a circuit board like that.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that those signals, now the traces on top of the circuit board being close to each other, does that have any potential for interference? Because my layman's brain tells me that it's not long enough to create an antenna to make some crazy interference. But I'm not an electrical engineer, so
Yeah.
what's your thought on that?
One of the design considerations I had to make for this was, the capacitance effects on the board. So what I have is extra vias throughout the board, just to ground each copper plate either side together, to minimize that, or remove that capacitance effect on the board. So yeah, that's the main thing I was looking at the time of designing it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I see, so you got the chip on there. So for people that need Sync Stripper for compatibility reasons, that's perfect. Just having it right there and having it, the space on the circuit board.
Yeah.
Just add it right in.
I'm working on, because this is for the PlayStation. I'm working on a little circuit board which will go actually in the header of this tiny little circuit board, with the Sync Stripper at this end. Because I know a lot of people say it's the wrong end of the cable.
if you're doing it for from what I gather at least, if you're doing it for the purpose of making something compatible, so you're using Luma, which you're not going to get interference from, but you require C-Sync, it doesn't matter because you're only doing it for compatibility. But if that was composite video, putting a Sync Stripper in the SCART head's useless. So but so I actually was, I had very few notes today when I was talking with you, because I feel like, we've been talking to each other for so long, I knew what I wanted to ask. But the one thing that I marked down that I really wanted to, I don't even know if this is possible, but the one thing that makes the PS2 stand out as so weird in all these is the Sync on Green, RGSB.
Oh, yeah.
And there's obviously all those devices that you can buy that converts it. There's some that just accept it. But is there a way to actually have a maybe not the LM 1881, but maybe a newer chip or something that could actually go in there and automatically switch when it goes from RGBS to Sync on Green, and then convert that to RGBS, so you actually have a 480p RGBS signal going out?
So you're talking component, aren't you, with Sync on Green? So you're wanting to use...
No, not component. Always RGB.
Right.
So, like right now, the way I would do it is I have a PS2 with this RGB SCART cable with using Luma as sync, which that seems to confuse everybody as well. A lot of people think you have to have Luma as sync to get Sync on Green. You just need any sync. Composite video, Luma, solder sync right on the board and have your wires hanging out, whatever. But I have that going into my G-SCART switch, which has the Sync Stripper, which is required to go into my Extron 203 RXI. And that unit takes anything that you put, any sync that you put into it, and converts it to any sync that you would like it to be. So when it's RGBS in, it just sticks RGBS out. But when it's RGSB in, it then converts that to RGBS out. And that allows my 480p compatible monitor, FrameMeister, a lot of other capture cards, a lot of other devices, instead of getting an RGSB signal, it's getting a 480p RGBS signal. So it really takes care of that. So, because a lot of people complain about the component encoder on the PS2, and that's obviously the best way to just get around that.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying now. For the high resolution, and you're wanting to then break out the sync.
Right.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I have to think about that.
Yeah, so I know a couple of people working on projects like that. Anything from like a converter box to stuff with that technology built in. But none of them have space constraints. None of them. So I would guess that there's no way in hell that would fit in the console end. But maybe it would fit in the SCART end. Because they're not using an LM188 1881. What they're using is a much newer, more expensive chip. And what it basically does is digitally scan and say, this is what's coming in. Well, you set it to this is what I always want going out, and then it scans what's coming in and always converts that. I'll
Yeah.
get you. I have it in my notes. I'll get you the chip for that later if you want it. But the space constraint is the only thing that none of those guys have to work with. So I don't even know if that's possible to put in a cable. But if you were to able to have a PlayStation 2 cable that can do that, so for 480i and 240p, it's just RGBS going out, perfect. You already do that. But when it swaps or when it goes into 480p mode, being able to handle that as well. FrameMeister users definitely would love that. Me and my could eliminate my Extron unit. I think that's it's obviously a niche item, but I know a lot of people that would definitely pay for that.
Has anybody tried putting like a T junction off the green, one route going to the green, and then another route going to the sink via a sink stripper?
The one or two people I know that did that, and they did it on a breadboard just to see if it would work. Got strange interference, and not a lot, but enough to say, hey, I'd rather just use component if this is what I have to deal with. So
I wouldn't use a breadboard.
Well, I mean, it was just a proof of concept to see if it would even work or not, though.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't have a component. Oh, actually, my BVM. I should try out my BVM, actually, yeah. But
actually, on your BVM, if you wanted to test it, just take one of your cables and then turn off external sync, and it should switch right over.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't have component on our consumer TVs here, because we have SCART.
Right.
So I can try out my BVM, maybe next week.
So I do have a question though. Do you? I haven't been on your website in a couple of months. I'm sorry. It's one of those things where like when I need something, I email you.
How dare you?
I haven't checked for updates or anything. But do you have separate cables for PS1 and PS2?
I've been doing some work on that because I know one. I don't have the notes to hand. One has the capacitors inside the motherboard.
PS2 does, and the PS1 doesn't.
PS1 doesn't. Right, okay. So the PS2, so all our cables at the moment have capacitors in. But I am planning on selling two separate cables because I now have a board with no capacitors on. It's just a pass-through with the 180 resistor on for the RGB switching. Yeah, because as you know, if you've got two capacitors in series, it halves the capacitance. So yeah,
right. I think it might have been Steve from HD Retrovision built yeah, it was him because he let me borrow it. He built a test rig so that you could actually plug different cables in, and I messed with it. I was going to make a video on it, but My Life in Gaming did a way better video, so I skipped it. But I think he found that using a much higher resistor worked for both PS1 and 2. But if you were going to make PS2 specific cables that had that weird sync stripper in it, that would kind of be a moot point anyway. But yeah, it's certainly something to look into because it's I don't know enough about this. I know just enough to be dangerous, is the term I always hear. So I chose to just have two cables, one that I have the resistors in, and one that I took them out of. So now I have a PS1 and a PS2 cable. But I think it might be worth trying at least for the basic cables to see if you could use one set of capacitors on both. So
yeah. And I've not cracked open a PS3 yet, so I don't know what's going on inside a PS3.
My only issue with the PS3 is it's 480i only. So while it's a great console, and while actually it was that same My Life in Gaming video showed that in many ways you can get PS1 and 2 games to look pretty good depending on the model of the PS3, that's all HDMI out. So I'm not really sure how many people would really need a PS3 RGB cable.
Yeah.
And I think it's literally impossible to ever hack it to do 240p. So much like the Xbox, the original Xbox.
Yeah.
I did have another question though. For GameCube, I had a bunch of people tell me that they tried to build their own. They basically took like a SNES cable that
Yeah.
with a composite video sync (CVBS) and added a sync stripper to it, and it didn't work. And then somebody said it's a known issue. I don't know anything about that. You want to obviously you do though. You want to explain why that happens and what the deal is with that?
Do you want to know my secret? Yeah, I came across the same problem and it drove me nuts. Again, just like the Genesis 2 problem. And all it turned out to be, I'm going to let you know now because I don't mind.
Well, somebody could just buy your
and all your
cable,
listeners-
open it, and
Yeah.
put it on the internet anyway. So
Well, look, they can't open it because it's sealed. I'm like Apple.
there you go.
It's a closed system. But all you need to do is put a 75 ohm resistor from the composite sync to ground,
Mhm.
and then the sync stripper will work. Simple as that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
fucking awesome. Huh. Yeah, because the GameCube is still, if you're in Europe, the GameCube is just the best way to play Game Boy Advance games. Just buy a cable with a sync stripper in it in case you have a monitor that's that's a little that's sensitive to that, and then just it's perfect. RGB out, 240p. Use the Game Boy interface software. It's quick and easy. So
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to my PAL GameCube. I gotta get another one of those. I often
Yeah.
lend stuff out to people and then forget that I lent it out to people. So I don't know where that one ended up.
Yeah, I've had a few query because obviously the NTSC doesn't output RGB video, so I often get inquiries from customers saying, "Can't you make a component cable for my NTSC GameCube?" And I just say to them, "Well, just buy a PAL GameCube; it'd be cheaper."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, is that something you would consider doing? Is just buying a load of PAL GameCubes and selling them bundled with a cable?
I don't know. I actually once had a crazy idea
Mhm.
to buy loads of SCART TVs from charity shops. Do you call them like thrift shops in America?
Yeah.
And just fill a container full and just ship it over to you. SCART inputs, then you can sell them.
So
Maybe recap them and sell
there's
them.
a company called Luva. I'm sure you've
Yeah.
heard of it, being in Europe, right? And they had a TV called the Articos that for years, even snobby industry insiders to whoever would all agree that it was the best TV out there, consumer TV. It's obviously
Yeah.
not like a $50,000 BVM. And the reason they stopped making them or shipping them to America was because it was something like a 20% failure rate from shipping on the boats.
Right.
And they put like accelerometers in each of the boxes and found that some of the containers were being dropped 3 or 4 feet off the ground.
By the crate.
Yeah. Well, the container that held everything in it, the actual big metal container. So
Yeah.
I would say that as amazing as an idea as that would be, you would probably end up with 50% failure rate.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't think it was a money spinner, to be honest. It's one of those crazy ideas I had,
yeah, well, I mean, something like that's amazing, and I could definitely hook you up with people that would take the container and warehouse them. But at that point, you're looking to break even and have a bunch of cool stuff. A huge piece of history be archived in a different country. But
Yeah.
having it break even would be challenging. So
The thing is, you need to convert the power supply on them to 110. It's a 240 here. So you need somebody at the other end to modify them.
we
Yeah.
have those people. That's easy.
Yeah.
Even just the few people that I know would be able to handle all of that without even blinking an eye. It's just getting them here that's the issue. So.
Yeah.
And if a company like Luva can't find an efficient way to pack them and get them here, then you and I probably aren't. So, but unless we just take each monitor, like take each 20, 30-inch monitor and wrap it in like a foot of bubble wrap. That way you could roll it down a hill and it'll still be fine. But it's
I know. I follow a page on Facebook called CRT. Oh, I can't remember.
CRT Collective.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yep.
I think a few people on there in America are doing RGB modifications on the monitors.
One of my
to be able
friends,
to.
Jose, is, and
Yeah,
he's on Twitter if you want to check out his. But he got really into it, and he gets just as excited about the stuff as we do. And I went down and actually got to see him doing one, and he makes it look easy now. I mean, it's just because he's done so many. He picks and chooses, of course. So he picks the ones that he knows has the jungle chips that he could work on with no problems. And the way, I mean, it's. And then he has his buddy Ben come in to cut the SCART hole in it so it looks factory. I mean, it looks straighter than some factory holes I've seen. So it's just, the people have been doing great jobs. And I think we haven't had a chance to test, but one of the things Jose and I really want to do is take a TV that has component video in and RGB mod that one to see what the
yeah,
difference is. Because it's my theory, which, could be useless, but a lot of the things built the circuitry inside the TV, which is designed for video, which when you play video through it could be very helpful. But when you play video games and you know for sure you're outputting an RGBS 75 ohm signal perfect, those the components inside the TV might actually take away from the signal. The filters they add, like the comb filters. So I'm wondering if just going direct into the jungle chip and modding that would actually make a better image than going into the TV. Something you guys out there could test too. Take a TV with a RGB SCART input and then RGB mod it to the chip and then see if you could see a noticeable difference.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I've got enough projects going on.
Yeah, I think we all do. Add that one to the list.
Yeah.
So there's one thing too that I've been talking to everybody about behind the scenes over the years, and it's there have been standards created in other industries that are basically fan standards, if you will. So the companies didn't create them, the fans did. And one thing I would love to see is a connector standard for consoles that we, the fans and the nerds and the people behind the scenes doing this say, hey guys, we found this one connector. It's available for 50 cents each from China. This is what we're going to use on all of the consoles that don't already have RGB outputs on it. So obviously Genesis and Super Nintendo, don't worry about it, but Coleco and Television, Atari, all the older ones. Have you been able to find any connector that would suit the needs of retro gamers? So RGBS, voltage for people in Europe that need that switching, and then of course left and right audio and good grounding. Is there something that you know of that people could use, or is it just or is it the same like FrameMeister connector 9 or 8 pin DIN that we've been using?
Yeah, to be honest, that I would use as you probably already have done is a VGA style 15-pin high-density D-sub, so the VGA style connector, because that then gives you the option to use a VGA switcher, like
Yeah. So everything you just said is correct, and you can get cheap shielded RGB or VGA cables for it. There are a couple of problems because I did this for 2 years or something. The problems you have is first longevity, right? I mean, I don't mean to be morbid, but everything dies, and when I'm gone and my console collection goes somewhere, and somebody plugs a VGA cable into a VGA monitor and says, "Oh, this doesn't work," yeah, it's junk. That's definitely going to happen in the future. Also, a round connector is ideal because anybody can use a drill and drill one hole without screwing something up. But try using a Dremel to cut a perfect shape for a VGA connector. That's hard. Some people I'm not good at it. It looks like I look like a Parkinson's patient when I'm doing it. It's just not. So those are the two main things, of course. But then also, everybody's stuck on SCART for retro gaming. So then you have to deal with VGA to SCART, which is a pain because even some of the ones that you've made a bunch for me that were fine, but then it's the same thing. People will take that cable, plug it into a computer, and say, "How come I can't run this through my SCART switch?"
Yeah, so they think it's VGA and it's not. So
they think it's they think it's VGA and it's not round, are the two things that as silly as that sounds, is a serious detriment. Analog NT, their NT Mini has a VGA connector for all the analog outputs, but that's a company with documentation, and that's a little different. And even though I think they made the right choice, it's still going to cause problems in the future. So,
Well, when analog they were known as interactive, weren't they? Analog interactive a few years ago. I think they're just analog now.
oh yeah,
But when they did the consoleized MVS
hmm
in the wooden box,
yes,
Chris from Analog contacted me about getting some RGB SCARTs made up.
hmm
He asked me the same question you're asking now. What connector should he use? What socket? Because he wanted to run RGB component, RGB and component. I don't know if he was using S-Video as well. I think he did S-Video. Anyway, so I suggested a 13-pin
hmm
DIN socket. So then he had enough connectors on there to run component and RGB. So we made a bunch of cables for them as well, using a 13-pin socket.
And is that socket available, in bulk from China?
Probably, but they're rarer than the, say, for instance, 8-pin DIN.
hmm
Yeah, that's the thing. When you think about, like for myself, when I think about manufacturing, I think, well, is this part going to be available, in the next few years? Is there going to be an abundance of, say, for instance, the capacitors I use on the PCB boards?
hmm
They're going to be in abundance for the next few years to sustain, production. With the DIN format, the DIN connectors, I don't really know how long they're going to manufacture them for, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that's a big issue. And even if you do something like, even if you work with a reputable shop, because I still have all of my contacts in China, I still call them on their birthdays and stuff like that, and it's I could easily say, hey, and I have asked them the question, and they basically say their answer is all the same, and it's mostly bullshit. But their answer is always, whatever you want, we'll make for you, as long as there's a minimum order of 1,000. And when you're talking about something like a connector, to order 1,000's not that big a deal. Just the connector itself,
Yeah.
Not nearly like if you had to order 1,000 cables or something like that.
Yeah.
But so that's good. But if we found one, I definitely would be able to have somebody say, okay, well, end of life is coming in 2019, so then we all chip in and place an order for 5,000. But what happens when those run out? So maybe we all just kind of talk and pick one and then make sure that it's made in a way where you could use possibly existing molds to make your cables for it, so you could have cables going for it as well. But because that's a big thing, and as much as VGA is probably going to be around the longest of all those DIN cables, DIN connectors, it's still it's still confusing to people. So that's definitely something I want to think about. So keep that in your mind, and because we're going to need you to make the cables for it. so
I had a customer call me today. He has a consoleized MVS, and the output socket on the back of that beast is a female SCART socket. So, that's a bit of an overkill. But so he could just use a regular male-to-male SCART from the MVS to the TV. But that must have taken a lot of cutting out, that kind of, how big SCART is. But I think your idea with regards to using a DIN is the neatest. Just drill a hole straight in there. I think the most popular one is the 8-pin DIN, and that's what a lot of people use on PC engines. To take out the 5-pin socket, put an 8-pin in there.
Right, yeah, and so far so good with that. The only problem I have is there's a few versions of that DIN. So the one that you put it through the back and then you screw the nut on the outside, and it's kind of like a plastic nut. Even with Loctite, I've heard that those break very easily. So, I mean, that right now would be my go-to. And do you make cables directly for that? Just pass through DIN to SCART cables?
For the PC engine, yeah. So there's no amplifiers in there. It's just a straight.
Yeah, it's just a straight pass-through cable.
Yeah.
So is that something that's readily available on your site?
The PC Engine, yeah.
And that's, I mean, so isn't that pinout the? Wait, no, that's the larger 8-pin DIN pinout, right?
Yeah. Eight pinned in,
I was
big
thinking
one.
of the one the one the FrameMeister uses pretty much.
Oh, the Mini. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one, I've seen a lot of people take that in like Zach Voltar. He just sent pictures of the last TurboGrafx 16 that he modded, and an idea he told me about a long time ago. But he removes the RF, and then flips that surface mount connector over, and uses the ground plane and solders it directly to the ground plane, and so that thing's good. It's never moving.
Solid.
Yeah, and then he so that's perfect. So but finding cables for that, and then so I mean I guess I can get a SCART to FrameMeister cable from you, but then I would have to move the sync pin over on the SCART head, right? Because that's input, not output.
No, it uses the same pin for sync. So an original non-modified would have left, right, audio, ground, sync on a 5-pin configuration, and then whoever comes to modify it, they put the 8-pin socket in and just add the red, green, and blue to the top 2 pins, top 2 and middle pin.
Right. No, I meant on the SCART end, because isn't there sync in and out? 19 and 20.
We just use 20, which is out.
Yeah, so your existing, I just meant that your existing cables, the ones that go from like the SCART output of a G-SCART switch to the FrameMeister input, the RGB input,
Yeah.
that would use a different sync pin than the opposite. FrameMeister side being the console side and SCART being the output side.
Yeah, so from the output from a switch would be pin 19 to pin 20.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like a crossover, and it's the same with the audio as well.
Yeah, I forgot about audio. Yeah. So, out of curiosity, what happens if you wire sync to both pins? Do you get loops then in using certain switches or something?
Oh, I've never done that.
I think I did in a test environment where I knew what the components were, so it didn't make the slightest bit of a difference because it wasn't connected in either scenario. But in a non-test environment, I don't know what that would do. So.
Yeah, I've never done that. No.
So the one other cable thing that's been bugging me for a while is Master System sync. So as I've learned over the years, if you use an SG-1000 from Japan, MK-2000. Jesus, only my second beer and I'm already forgetting shit. The MK-2000 from Japan has all of the components on the board, so you just need a pass-through cable for RGBS.
Yeah.
But there are different. I mean, I have people all the time say I bought a Master System and an RGBS cable, and I am not getting a signal.
Yeah.
And I've had people send them to me, and I just don't understand what the issue is. Do you have any? And the one person sent me had the all the correct components in the SCART head, so they wanted me to test an RGB bypass on it anyway. So I did the full bypass, and it worked perfect afterwards. So is it that the Genesis sync signal isn't the TTL sync is off? Was it any thoughts on that?
So this is you say the Mark II?
No, just the Master System.
The Master System in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not really sure. So we sell a C-Sync cable for the Master System.
And do you ever have people call you up and say, "Hey, it's not working on my Master System"?
No, I don't have any reported issues. Generally, if I've heard anything, I tend to look into it and try and sort it out. But I've got a couple of Mark I Master Systems which I use for testing, and they all seem to work fine on C-Sync. So you've got to make sure you have 75 ohm resistor and 220 microfarad capacitor in series on the sync line, because that's not on the motherboard. So if you look at the signal, if you look at the sync signal, it kind of bypasses the encoder and goes straight to the socket.
Right.
So you've got to add these components in the in the SCART. So
It's actually funny because sync comes right off of the main video chip and
yeah,
basically into your TV. I mean, you could tone it out just with a multimeter if you don't need a scope or anything. Then, it beeps at the input of the CXA encoder, and it beeps at the output, and then it beeps at the end of your cable. So there's really no components at all. And there are for RGB, obviously. Those need amplification on the board through the CXA, but yeah, that's strange.
yeah.
So in your testing, it's always just been the 75 ohm resistor and 220 UF capacitor?
On the sync line, yeah.
Oh,
And then
yeah,
we
yeah.
also add those on. You see, the Sega only put the 220 microfarad capacitor and 75 ohm resistor on the composite video output because they just assumed people were using composite video.
Right.
So we add these extra components for the red, green, and blue on the SCART PCB. And because we only offer the C-Sync version of the Genesis and Master System cable now, so if this is the PlayStation, but on our Master System one, we've got an extra capacitor around the front as well for the sync, and resistors on there as well. So, yeah. My wife keeps ringing me. I don't know if you heard that, but she keeps. I told her, I said, I'm doing a podcast tonight. Don't disturb me. She's actually visiting auntie and uncle down south in Shrewsbury at the minute. She's been down there a week with the kids. So I've just been sat here in front of the TV playing Xbox.
Oh, so this is a perfect time
Every
for a
night.
podcast, a drinking podcast then. This is great.
And then she rings me yesterday and says, I think I'm going to stay another week. I was like, she said, are you going to be upset? I'd be, oh no, I think I'll be fine.
I'll make do. Yeah, it's funny. My wife just went away last weekend. She's like, oh, what'd you do while I was gone? Nothing. Just enjoy the apartment alone. So, yeah, I know the feeling. But
So basically, it's like a bachelor pad now. So the day before she comes back, I'm going to have a tidy up. Rush around and do everything at once.
So, I think I covered everything I wanted to ask. I mean, was there anything that you wanted to talk about that I forgot to mention or anything like that?
No, not really. It's, I don't know.
Anything coming up in the future other than the cables?
I'm a bit pissed now. I don't know. I'd like to have more time to do the electronic side of stuff. I like messing around, and I just don't seem to have the time or the space at the minute. My workshop, it's about 500 square foot.
Oh, cool.
So it's big, but I've got a couple of employees who work for me, so they've got their own space as well. But basically, I just have one desk. So if I ever want to do some testing, I get the scope out, put it on my desk. I've got to move everything out the way, do what I want to do, and then put it in my book, and then shift it all out the way again, and then make cables again.
Yeah.
But on the 1st of April, we're moving to a bigger facility. It's 2,000 square foot.
Oh, wow.
So it's huge. So I'm gonna have my own R&D room, so I can do all the bits I want to do. Just like keep it all in there, and jump in there whenever I need to, and just do some testing. Because I've been working on a SCART switch for a few years, and I built a prototype, and I've just never managed to. I don't seem to find the time anymore, to continue that. But I'd like to get back onto that again and do some work on it. So that's one of the projects I'm doing. And hopefully with the new workshop, because they're selling the building I'm in at the moment. It's been sold, so we're having to leave.
Yeah.
But we're running out of space anyway, so that's we've got this new place, and it should be a lot better. I'm ranting on now. I'm a bit pissed.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I really appreciate you you getting on and doing this. I mean, it's always so fun to see the people I've been working with for years, and I've never actually talked over the phone or seen them before. So it's kind of fun. It's good catching up and everything. And I'm definitely gonna have you back on at some other point in the future to talk about what other neat invention you got coming up with. So.
That's my wife ringing again.
All right. Well, you answer the phone, and I'll see everybody next week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.